Okay, thank you for tuning into Stampscaping 101. This was a little test here, not in terms of paper, which is, I don't know, a more recent test. This is all using King James Castcoat. It's a glossy cardstock. It's very similar to the Ranger and Kromekote brands. There's other types of papers out there that you can use. If you're curious to know if this technique, as far as dye-based ink applications, work on your glossy cardstock, it's just the best thing to do is just to test it out and to play around with it. Different papers act different with different brands of inks all the time. Alright, now one of the things that I wanted to do in this video is an important part of this technique of glossy cardstock and dye-based inks, okay? I get questions about this often, and it's a completely understandable comment. I guess it's more of a comment, but people don't get, sometimes, the results that it seems like I'm getting in my videos, okay? Now, on these ones right here, I just did the background swatches first because it's more of a kind of an ink paper video and combinations of inks and papers, not different papers, but inks, brand of inks, I should say, in achieving kind of this nice rich color glow, okay? So what I'm doing in this video, if you choose to watch it, is I'm using some different brands here. I'm using them together and independently and in various applications as far as both coverage, but more importantly, the amount of buildup that you're achieving using a given color, okay? Now, what I have found in almost every case, okay? I used to teach live workshops, so I can watch people do it, you know, and I've watched people do it over years. But the more coverage that you get, okay, and buildup of your first colors that you're using, in my process, it tends to be lighter tones, okay, as my first colors, and the colors that I'm using are kind of, the inks are fairly thick, okay, Ranger Industries and Memento, Sukaneko, those inks tend to be kind of thick, so I really want to build up quite a bit on the surface of the card, okay? Because if I do that, then I know that all the other colors that are going to get built, you know, applied over the top of those ones will spread really nicely and smoothly, but the end result can also look like a deeper, richer, more vibrant surface in the end result, okay? So this one right here is using an Adirondack Lights Aqua plus Marvy, okay? On this one right here, I used more ink of all the colors that I worked through on this one, which is this right here, plus black, okay? Same colors, same paper, more saturated here. So it looks like it's glowing a little bit more. This looks okay though, but this one just has a deeper glow in these colors right down here, okay? I see a lot more of a dark blue and black down here and Prussian blue or whatever, but the undercolors, you know, are really affecting the overall. And this one up here, I just skipped I was showing what you can achieve using, I can't remember if I used the two different colors of blue plus black, where's my black pad, or if I just used one of these blues and the black. But you can see the difference between kind of hurrying to get to the just end result dark colors, and this one right here I did a compare contrast thing where I added the lighter medium tones, okay, in this bottom portion. So you can see it just looks different. It's a deeper, richer, you know, surface than this part. And this one right here, this one's all using the Memento inks. And Memento inks are real buttery and thick, and they kind of spread around very nicely over the surface of a card, but they don't get quite as intense as your Marvy inks. So I used some of the Marvy ink down here just so we can see a little bit of a difference, you know, between this top portion and the bottom portion. When I mentioned in this video, I thought this top portion looks kind of nice in terms of like a kind of a foggy, subdued look. But the bottom area down here looks a little more intense and deep and rich in terms of the water. So I don't think one of these is necessarily better than the other, but you can use certain combinations for the look that you're going after, you know, kind of more of a subdued, foggy, you know, day or morning or whatever. Maybe the Mementos up top there or something like that. And for the deeper, richer, more intense areas, maybe you can use those in conjunction with Marvy's, or you can just go with Marvy's alone or something of that sort. So kind of playing around and getting to know your pads and what their strengths and weaknesses are, you know, and then supplementing with another ink brand or line can really give you a kind of a formidable palette from which to kind of define the, I think it's the emotional quality of a scene, you know, and how it looks, okay? We don't want everything this intense all the time, right? If we want, this doesn't say subdued, kind of I don't know, moody, somber, or something like that. It looks very bright, vibrant to me, you know, for the most part in terms of an emotional quality, where something like that would help. And on these tests right here, I went to all the way to dark. You don't always have to do that, okay? You can do, you know, just stick with, you know, your lighter tones or something like that, and go to a medium tone and just stay with that. So playing around with things is always the best bet. Finding out how your papers work with the brands of inks that you're using, but also the lines of inks within each brand. So there's so many different inks out there and ink companies. It's kind of, you know, there's not too many different paper companies, thankfully. You know, thankfully there's not 20 brands of glossy cardstock. You know, we'd kind of be in trouble if we wanted to know which one works the best. But as far as just the ink combinations, you know, quite different. A little bit of a glare here, but anyway, this, as I mentioned in this video, this test was as much for me as it was for kind of demonstrating this. I wanted to kind of play around and see what things look like myself. So anyway, hope you enjoy it if you choose to watch it, and hope it comes in handy for those with for those that might have questions about paper and inks and the combinations of them. So a lot of your preliminary inks, and not just in terms of quantity of colors, okay, but it's the amount of ink of those that you use on a piece of paper that will determine the overall kind of end appearance, okay? So it's not about just all about coverage. It's about that buildup, and that's key with a lot of this technique here. Thanks for tuning in again. Okay, we're going to do a series of ink tests here. One of the things that comes up quite a bit as far as questions on the technique that's being used in a lot of these videos, which is the dye-based inks and glossy paper technique, okay? A lot of people don't feel that the ink application that they're doing at home looks similar as far as the characteristics that they're viewing to what I'm doing. And just from teaching workshops, when I used to do that over the years, I know exactly what they're referring to. I would say usually. I mean, there's always a chance that it's something else. But It's usually about the quantity of the first couple inks that's used, okay? Now, I don't stick to just one brand of inks. I like to mix and match because certain inks from different companies have different colors, you know, within their lines, and there's also different characteristics. Although some of them might be subtle between, you know, from brand to brand. My main ones are inks from Ranger, Marvy Cheetah, and I use a lot of the Memento ones too. And then Ranger Industries makes the Adirondacks, the distress inks, and I don't know, maybe there's probably a couple more lines, but those are the ones that I've come to use over the years, primarily. Going back, there used to be ink pads called like Vivid pads from, I think it was Clear Snap, and there's a number of other lines out there, and they're all, you know, quite good. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a series of tests here. Okay, now this video is as much for me as it is a demonstration for all of you, but I want to show some different looks here. Well, we'll see if there's different looks or not, okay? But one of the things, you know, in kind of achieving a really thick, saturated, deep look to your inks, or to your scenes, it's about this first color of ink, okay? Now this one's the Adirondack Lights Aqua. And this batch of ink right here, this isn't a dry pad right here by any means, but this one looks like it's... Sometimes the inks are a little bit different, you know, from batch to batch. That one looked really super light for some reason. It's almost invisible here for some reason. I don't know why. It's either that or it just looks that way to my eye. But this is an ink. It was a line of inks, okay? You can still kind of find them out there here and there on different sites for sale. But the Adirondack Lights were shadow stamping inks, okay? So the idea behind it was you stamp some kind of image, you know, in whatever color or darker color, then you stamp it again, a little bit offset in the lighter Adirondack tone, and it looks like a shadow. I guess it could look like a watermark or something like that too, but anyways, what I'm doing with this ink is I'm going to go with a blue color scheme on this one, okay? Now, I've achieved a good amount of coverage, okay? I've put it over the whole thing. Now, I'm just doing this for the test. I don't know that I would use this much over the entire page on every scene. If I wanted something to remain light, it's going to remain light. But this is for the sake of a color test, okay? Alright, so I'm getting this down right here, okay? But if you notice, I'm really getting a good saturation of it, okay? These inks really spread nicely too. You can use the worst technique possible, which is this, this, this. And if it's on glossy paper, you can just do this, right? And it spreads around very nicely. And see, that's the main characteristic of that ink for me. Any of the Adirondack Lights. I mean, it could almost just be, and I've asked him about this before too, a long time ago, but I just said, hey, do you have that same binder, whatever's used in this, you know, meaning the solution that you've used the dye-based, you know, or the colors in? And I think there was some spray bottle of something, and you can almost just spray this and get the page card nice and wet, okay? For the other colors to layer on top of it so that they spread nice and smoothly, okay? Alright, so this could easily get confusing, so I'm going to have to document what I'm doing here. So I'm going to say aqua, and I'll say plus, okay? I'm saying that there's a lot of ink, or there's coverage plus additional layers on there. So I really saturated it, right? I mean, I put a lot of ink down on that one. Okay, now let's do it with this one again. Or, not again, but let's get a new piece of paper. And I'm just going to go for coverage, okay? I'm just going to go for an edge-to-edge application, and that's all, okay? I'm not going to build the color up, that ink up, okay? Now I could do 50 layers of this on this piece of paper, and because it's dye-based ink, it's not going to get any darker, okay? But that's not what that was about, okay? But that's what a lot of people are doing with their first color, and it's completely understandable, you know? You think, okay, I can see the blue is in the blue position on the card, so they move on to the next color because it's not getting any darker. But in the technique of multiple layers of dye-based inks, okay, getting that first layer down there really allows for kind of a smooth application of the colors to come. Okay, now my combination that I'm doing a lot of is a thick ink like that Adirondacks and just about everything from Ranger. They're thicker inks, okay, than, in relatively speaking, in comparison to Marvy inks, okay? So what I'm going to do now is I'll go on with the Marvy ink. Now I'm moving incrementally in terms of my value, okay? So I'm going from that Adirondack Lights to the Marvy Salvia Blue, which is their lightest blue in pad form, okay? Now see, I can get some of that down there, and it spreads around nicely, okay? It's because I have that nice slippery ink on the surface of this card, and I have it in quantity. I have quite a bit of it down. Now, the color that you see right now happening with the Salvia Blue really isn't entirely indicative of the value that it is. It's a darker color, but because I have that Adirondack Lights Aqua, not as much of this ink is transferring to the paper, at least in a very quick manner, okay? It still looks very light, okay? But this is more the color that it is right here, okay? But because I have it thick and saturated on the paper's surface, it's allowing me to spread it around. Okay, now let's go to this one right here. Let's spread it on. It's not too bad. It's spreading okay, you know, but if I go like that, let me see. Yeah, okay, it's allowing me to spread it pretty good. This is a glossy cardstock. Okay, it's not photo paper like you would buy at an office supply store for the purpose of your inkjet printer, okay? That has a different surface on it. Okay, now I can kind of see a little bit of that oval shape that I kind of put down there. And it's because it's not spreading out quite as nicely or smoothly as this other page that I put more of that first ink down, okay? So this page right here isn't quite as coated or, say, lubricated with the first color, okay? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put more of this ink down, okay? Because I'm going for a little bit of saturation with this Salvia Blue as well, okay? Now it's getting a little bit darker. It's because it's setting up and the paper's being allowed to, you know, I allowed it to dry a little bit. Okay, so let's see, right here I have less ink, and this one I have more, alright? So we can see this side, I hope you can see it, this side's getting a little bit darker than this side, okay? But this side does have coverage, almost as much coverage, but this one just has more of a buildup, okay? Alright, so let's say, this one's aqua, I have aqua, and then salvia blue. I'll just say number 60 because that's the color here. I'll just say aqua minus and minus here. Ouch. Poke myself in the finger. Alright, that's aqua. Let's move to the light blue, which is kind of a medium tone blue from Marvy. It's a very bright blue, which is nice. I'd say blue's a cool tone, but I would say there's no warm, like a yellow to it, you know, which would make it slightly more aqua or green or something, turquoisey. Okay, let's get a good amount of it down here. Sometimes what I do is I take and I squeeze some ink off like that, and then I drag it in, okay? Now I don't do this with the Marvy inks on a dry piece of paper, otherwise it's going to really imprint. Yeah, it did a little bit there, but I don't use that technique. I was just doing it as an example. So get a good amount of ink down like that, and then spread it out, okay? Let's get a good amount on the edges for a nice kind of vignette effect, if we're going for that, which I usually do. Ink application, and then spread. Okay. Now let's go for this one right here that has less ink on it, but there's still a similar amount of coverage, okay? There's just not the buildup, but as far as like an edge to edge. This one, okay, now this one right here, because I didn't lay down as much ink underneath this color, there's a little bit of a grab on this foam tip. Okay, I can feel it grabbing. I can still get a good application though, like a smooth application. One of the things that I'm doing here too, I never really press hard. Now, sometimes when I was squeezing the ink out, I pressed a little bit harder, but when I'm doing this stroke right here, I'm just touching the page, okay, and it's just like wiping it across, okay? If I want it darker, I'm going to go with more repetition, okay? I'm not going to press harder, okay, because that's going to give me a rough, you know, possibly very streaky application with the foam tip here, okay? Meaning I don't want to get this type of thing showing, okay? So that's another thing too. Sometimes when it's not getting any darker, people feel like they have to really press, and that's not the case at all. That's the opposite of really what you want to do, okay? You want to just go with repetition so you get that nice, smooth, and easy application, okay? It's not dragging and pull, because then you're going to get that, okay? It's just more like this little swipe here, okay? And it's very light to the touch. The weather in my location here today is supposed to get up to like the upper 90s, almost 100. So the humidity of this area it's going to be very dry today. Not that it can't be hot and very humid, but weather does play a factor too. Okay, that was the number 10 blue, and we'll go number 10 minus here, okay? Looks pretty good, but this one's just more saturated, okay? Now let's go to this number 3 blue. let me show you what this color looks like just on a white piece of paper, okay? Quite dark, okay, but look at it here. It's because when you're kind of applying wet into wet, you don't get all of that ink transferring so fast, and that's where you get the smoother swipes here too. You know, it's like if I had, you know, a sponge brush or something like that, and I was applying it to a piece of cardboard, right? It's going to have a different feel than if you're taking, you know, this sponge and you're applying it to, let's say there was a wet piece of glass or something like that. You know, that's kind of the feel that you're going after. If you kind of wet something down and then you're running something across it, there's a little bit of a more of a smooth, kind of a gliding action to it. One of the things too that you can do too is if you really want to get a really thick application of some color, like say that Adirondack or some base coat, you can also just use the re-inker fluid. Apply it to your tip and then really spread it around. Okay, so anyways, let's go for a little bit more on the corners right here. Alright, that is the number 3 blue, applied with an abundance as far as my saturation goes, in addition to my coverage. Notice how I'm turning my card, because this right hand is just doing this type of motion right here. If this hand starts getting tired, use less pressure and use more swipes, because this does not really take much energy. But if I'm pressing while I'm doing that, you know, it's a little bit more of an unnatural movement, so I'm used to it though. But it's nice and ergonomic. See, I have my hand is just turned like this. Our hands naturally go like this, so I'm just doing this right here, okay? It's nice and comfortable. And I believe that, you know, if you're kind of in a more comfortable position, or as comfortable a position as you can get, the scenes will come out more, I don't know, smooth and more effortless looking than if you're kind of in an awkward position. Okay, so we have these two going right now. They're pretty similar, alright? Now I used a lot of blue on that one. Alright, now here's the thing that I'm looking at here. This one's lighter, okay, for one. Okay, so these two areas right here, this is generally a little bit darker, okay? This one looks pretty similar on that side. This might be a little touch darker right here. But let's do something here. Okay, now, make sure I'm doing it on the right one. Let's go back to that number 10 blue, okay? Now you can do this on your scenes. You can go back to a previous color and just add more of that tone if you want to. I want to add some more of that number 10. Now I have some of the number 3 in here too, but that's okay. I want to kind of boost this up a little bit more. that's a little bit richer, okay, than this one. They both look good, okay, to my eye at least. But one's just a little bit deeper in terms of the saturation. When I say deeper, I don't necessarily mean darker, although it could be, but I'm just talking about the kind of the intensity of the color, okay? You can reach, there's values in color, okay, and that's the relative light and dark. But then there's the intensity of it, the relative bright and dull, okay? Bright is something different than light, okay? You can have a very bright, super bright blue that's very dark, okay? It's just very rich and intense. Alright, now this isn't the light blue, someone just wrote that on there. This is the number 29 Prussian blue. That's as dark a blue as you can get as far as dye-based inks go. Okay, that's the number 29. It's a beautiful, beautiful blue. And I would call Prussian blues pretty bright, you know, as far as that goes. Most Marvy colors are pretty bright for the most part. I guess there are some that aren't, but if I was to characterize it, you know, just on the whole, I would say they're probably brighter colors than most other brands. Which isn't necessarily, you know, I don't want all bright colors a lot of times, you know, sometimes it's just too hot. I don't want like a, you know, a super day glowish looking, you know, color scheme or something like that. That's why I use different brands together, so I can have a range of not only colors and values, but also the relative brightness of a color. Okay, going on to the dull one here. Well, it's not too dull, but duller. Okay, now one of the things I'm seeing here is because I didn't use as much ink on this one, so like I said, it's a little bit grabby, but I'm seeing kind of the texture of the pad, foam pad a little bit more, okay? And that's what people are seeing a lot of times in their pieces, okay? They're seeing, you know, texture, which isn't a bad thing again, but it's just kind of a drier feel to it, okay? Let's see if we can see it here. There's a little bit in this one, okay, but not as much. Alright? It's just, it's subtle. I don't know if this is going to pick up at all. Okay, but this one's a little bit more smooth. At this point in time, I feel this one's glowing a little bit more in terms of the intensity. This one's glowing too in terms of the value scheme, okay? Light, medium, dark. But this one, the brightness is going a little bit more, okay? Now, a lot of times what they do too is I also work through, what was that? 4, 5 different colors on each of these. So if one of the colors wasn't used in here, it probably wouldn't have quite the range or quite the intensity of either one of these. Like say if I left out that number 10 blue, then we're talking about a very different looking, you know, color swatch, okay? Alright, so that is that. Actually, maybe that isn't that. Let me go to the number 1, which is black, okay? And let's go one step a little bit darker. I'll do this on one side of this card, and you can see if you can see the difference here. If you use black, to stamp out any of your imagery, I would recommend doing a little bit of black, as far as this look goes, on the edges, okay? You can see from one side to the next, right? It's kind of nice having that one extra step in value, because if you make the edges or the corners or something like that, or some part of your scene one step darker, by contrast, you'll be making whatever the light areas of your scene are one step lighter. Okay, so it's all kind of relative. So we have a nice glow there. Let's do it on this one too. So I kind of might go like this. Watch this. See? Most of it's off the page, right? And then I just kind of drag it in a little bit. And if you've put enough of a layer down of color underneath, this will blend in very nicely, okay? If it's catching and you're forgetting too much of the, like these shapes right here on your card and they won't blend out, if you're using glossy paper, all right, it would usually mean that there's not enough of your lighter colors built up in kind of as far as the saturation of that color. Undercolors, okay, there's not enough undercolors, you know what I'm kind of talking about in this video. Building it up, okay? So the buildup of those lighter tones, now I don't see a lot of that first color, okay? Which would be the aqua. Remember, it coated this whole thing here. It even coated the white part. But that aqua and that salvia blue and all these other tones underneath this are building up and affecting the overall, okay? So this is the positive one, okay? The one where I've used a lot of ink. This one I used quite a bit of ink too, but just not as, you know, the same as that one. This one looks pretty good right here, but this one just looks better in terms of the intensity and that glowing aspect of it, okay? That light blue in there really kind of set the stage for it. Okay, now let me do something here too. Let me, because this is a comparison video, let me just jump. Now I'm going to have some other tones of blue in here, but let's go to that. Let's just go straight to the Prussian blue, okay? And we'll compare the Prussian blue application on here to the Prussian blue over here. Actually, I used black on that corner too. So let's go Prussian blue and black on this one, okay? Now this is spreading a little bit easier with the Marvy ink on just a blank piece of paper, because I do have some of the, you know, the Ranger inks mixed in with this tip here. Not too much at this point in time, but there is still quite a bit. Now on this one right here, Marvy inks are thinner, so I'm not going to want to do this and then try to blend it out. It's just not going to happen. So I have to go with my just, you know, this streaking kind of method and keep it nice and light. Notice I don't have those oval shapes very apparent. Okay, or, you know, I'm not getting those at all. Okay, so we have a smooth application here, kind of. it's not as smooth as putting it over the top of other colors, but I don't, you know, it's a little bit streaky and whatever. But now let me put a little bit of that black on the perimeter here, okay? So this is kind of an extreme example of, you know, undertones or the absence of them, you know, in terms of how something will look. It's a little bit more precarious of an application too, because the paper is so dry, and dark colors are going to, of course, leave the strongest impression, mark. But you can still do it though. It's just not going to have the same look, okay? But okay, so that was Prussian blue and black. So let's see here. Let's take a look at all three. Okay, so we have a pretty good transition in terms of the technique right here. We can see which one is glowing more in terms of the color intensity, okay? I think this one is. Now I put down some additional number 10 blue, but don't look at it in terms of that. Number 10 blue is very visible right in here where I haven't put any colors over it. But I think that this area right in here, where I've applied colors over the top of that number 10 blue, those areas look a little bit more, they look rich to me and saturated, okay? Over here, this one looks pretty good too. But this one right here, it's not really glowing except for the values, right? There's no intensity to this one at all. Like this down here, look at how that really glows right in here. And this one right here really doesn't, okay? But now let's take a look at some of our darker areas here. Okay. See this right in here? There's much more of an intensity and kind of an inner glow. This one, that number 10 is in there, but not quite as much as here. And of course here, there's nothing. I think that looks okay for certain, you know, usages, but or things that you might be going after, but okay. So look at it right here and here. All right, let's pull this a little bit more. Okay. All right, so that is Ranger plus Marvy. All right. Okay, now let's look at some other tones. Okay, let's just go with another one of my favorite inks. And I don't think I've done just a straight comparison before between one brand of inks and the other. All right, now I'm not going to just go through all the Marvys, and I think you get the point there, you know, and then some on that one. But let's take a look at these Marvy inks. All right. My sponge tip here is kind of smashed. I thought it was okay. I pulled out some, like, I don't know, 15-year-old sponge tips that were in storage, and some of them look okay, some of them, it's like you depress and it doesn't spring back like it did, so those ones will be old, to say the least. Okay, this is Memento Summer Sky. I like Memento inks. My Memento ink here might be a touch dry. Let's get some of that down. I don't know why my inks today, they look so light. I don't know, maybe this room is lighter today. There's a lot of sun out right now here. I have the windows, the blinds opened. Okay, I'm going for coverage. Okay, I'm going for saturation here. So I'm getting a good amount down and then spreading it out. Getting a little puddle and then spreading it out. I don't know why this Memento looks almost as light as the Adirondack's Aqua. This Memento Summer Sky is an excellent initial ink choice for your blue color schemes, or blue areas within a scene. Since the Adirondacks, all of the Adirondacks are discontinued anyway, Memento Summer Sky is a good choice to go with. Okay, this is Bahama Blue. It's very similar to this number 3 Marvy, wouldn't you say? Okay, it's blending beautifully. Memento inks are very thick and I guess they're light fast, meaning they won't fade. Well, that's what it says. For lasting impressions, fade-resistant dye ink. I've never done a test on them to see if they, they are indeed light fast, but I would imagine they are. If that's one of their main selling points. Okay, get a good amount down, just kind of spread it around. These inks really allow you time to really spread them around, which is fantastic. It's a fantastic trait for your first colors of ink. Now here's the problem though, sometimes when you start doing this, if you're kind of going with really thick inks like this, we'll see how it goes with my third ink, or fourth if I do that. Sometimes they're so thick and the buildup is so extreme that it's just like the other one there, but those ones did apply. Sometimes you get to about the third ink or fourth ink, and if they're all kind of in that same type of color thickness, ink thickness, sometimes it's really hard to apply them, it's just not getting darker, very quickly at all because of that wet into wet aspect. Okay, let me show you what color that ink is right there. See, it's pretty dark, right? It's just like the number 3 Marvy ink, almost exactly in terms of that value of blue and the tone. I almost think they designed their 3 inks around those ones, the Marvy matchables, but who knows. But very similar in hue, value, etc. Very different in terms of their kind of properties beyond that. These Memento inks are much, much thicker as far as their consistency goes. So this one right here, since they're all Mementos too, they're really applying very, very smoothly, okay? Okay, now I can let this set up a little bit longer, okay, if I wanted to. And then I can go with more applications of this Memento blue. But let's just take a look here and see the differences. Okay, now on this one, of course, I did go to black. But see, here's the Memento. Alright, let's try to get a little bit darker right now. I'm trying to build it up, so I'm just tapping instead of swiping. Okay, now I realize I haven't used black on this yet either. But this is where some of the differences, okay? Now, like I said, but that's the blue right there from Marvy. Marvy penetrates a little bit easier, right? Over the top of thickings like Ranger on that case. This one again is just the Mementos. It's a softer, smoother look, though. And I think it looks good. But if we want to go with darker tones, we have a couple different choices. We can kind of just let it set up a little bit longer and apply more ink on a drier piece of paper. But let's do a test here, okay? Let's use some of that Memento with some of the Marvy, all right? I tell you what, why don't we do this? I'll do half of this with Memento and Marvy, and we'll just leave this side, the left-hand side, with only Memento, okay? And we'll take a look at this. Okay, this is the number 10 blue, that very bright blue. It's a bright medium blue, I should say. Okay, we have that. Can you see any difference? Does that look a little bit more intense here than this side? Just in terms of the brightness, okay. Now let's go to the number 3 blue. Now the Marvy inks are a little bit thinner, or quite a bit thinner actually. So I'm getting a little bit more coverage, okay? It's penetrating the page and it's transferring over to that, over to the card. Okay. Kind of thin over thick in terms of the style of application. Okay, so this one looks like this, alright? It looks pretty good. It's a softer look, okay? But this side is just more intense, I would say, right? I think they both look good, alright? Sometimes you don't want everything that intense, but okay, now let's do another comparison here. Let's go all the way to black to make this a fair comparison. I'm just going to be looking at the right-hand side of this one here that goes all the way to black. But let's take a look and see how those Memento inks influence the overall look. It's a beautiful, kind of a smooth application of this color. It's a very soft look. With the Memento inks. It's like butter. Okay, so let's take a look here. Memento. Memento with Marvy. Less coatings here, all right? And full saturations here. So we can kind of, oops, we can kind of see a little bit of a difference here between each one, or quite a bit of difference, I would say. Okay. Deep, rich saturations, a little bit less. Pretty decent on this side, and less on this side, okay? This side right here, let's compare the kind of the application of this one now. It's a little bit kind of streakier here, right? But do you see how this one's kind of just a real smooth transition? Yeah. I don't mind streaks like that, though. A lot of times if I do it like that, it looks more like water, right? To have those streaks in there. Now, I could make this one streakier if I wanted to, too, but, you know, look at those transitions right here. Those look pretty good. And this one right here, I don't see my black as much. If this one dries out, it'll dry a little bit duller, too. Okay. And here's this comparison to this side. I mean, there's no comparison at all, right? But that side looks pretty good. When that, you know, this top portion, using all mementos, wouldn't that be fantastic as something like a foggy sky or something like that, or if it was like kind of a little bit more of an overcast sky around, I don't know, dusk or something. I think that would be nice, where I might not want it, you know, to be so intense like that. These colors right here, though, that deep saturation, wouldn't that be fantastic as water to have that kind of glowing blue light like that, as far as water went. I can try it here. Let's see. You know, like a Lakeside Cove or something like that would be good. Let's just do some a little quick application with those trees here. I wonder if this is really saturated, and if I stamp this on here, I'm wondering if it's going to be dark enough. I kind of need to re-ink my black inker, re-inker too. Re-ink my pad with the re-inker, I should say. Okay. Alright, let's try this right here. Now, I would finish off that other side, but, you know, with black or something like that. But let's just see if we can kind of get a little hint of what the scene could look like. Now I'm stamping it over kind of all these thick inks and thick saturations of ink, so without waiting for, you know, like 10 minutes or something like that, I'll just hope that the ink transfers enough, you know, for the sake of this video. I don't know, I guess I could pause the video too. Plenty of pressure in the center of it. Yeah, okay, pretty good. You have your scene back there. I can have another one right here or something. And then what you do is you hit your shadows down here a little bit with some tone. But see, that would be kind of a nice, subtle, kind of change from one part to the other. Do you see how intense this is down here? Would that be nice for some kind of like deep water? To have some kind of like a deep glowing water right there, but the sky is a little bit more subtle, right? In terms of the the intensity of it all. Okay. So, as far as vocabulary of color goes, you know, you're playing around with, again, the hue, which is the color, what color you're using, and then there's value, relative, you know, light, medium, dark, and the thing that kind of I'm focusing more on in this video is the intensity of it all. You know, you can have something that's dull and something that's very bright, and you can have all the range, you know, the range in between, to give your surface a more varied, you know, look. The wider range of everything within a scene, you know, the visually diverse and exciting a scene might be in the end result. Okay, so we have our couple rocks right there. We have more intense glowing water and, you know, a varied semi-glowing sky. Okay, it'd be good to put a little tone up here, you know, a little bit darker right here and here to kind of vignette it, and I would throw more blues down here in the shadows. Usually in the shadows there's more kind of an intensity to the colors too, so some bright blues down there in the shadows maybe. Alright, let's take a look here again. Okay. Okay, we can test our eyes here. We're going to do an eye test. Alright, which one is the most intense as far as kind of a surface glow goes? And then which one is the most dull? And then you can say which one is the most varied, okay? I think this one's glowing the most, you know. And here, doesn't it have that kind of intensity coming from within? This one a little bit less so, but okay. This one is absent that, but, you know, sometimes it's not appropriate to have all this, you know. And then this one, it's kind of a little bit of both, right? It's a little bit kind of more dull up top in terms of the intensity, not in terms of interest, but richer down here in the base, okay? Now I think a lot of times when people aren't getting what they see, you know, in terms of the application process or the end result, it looks more like this to me usually when they show me. It's like somewhere in between this and this, all right? And it's definitely not this. With something like this, I'm sorry I'm saying this so much, okay? Let's say you get something of this with that type of result, okay? And sometimes it looks flat, too, all right? That's what people tell me. One of the things you can do, and this is the beauty of dye-based inks, okay? This is a Memento Bahama Blue. I'm just using it to put on here. Let me do it on one half of this scene right here, okay? Now, even if it's fairly dark up here, you can add some of that rich glowing aspect. I'll do it half and half, so you can see kind of, you can do a comparison from one side to the next. Okay? This is darker, but, you know, there's a little bit more variation here. Now let's go to that really bright blue in the Marvy, okay? If I put this blue over the top of this, darker color. It's not going to lighten the darker color up, okay? But hopefully you get more of this kind of rich tone, though, in the darker areas than what was apparent without it, okay? Okay, so see, that's kind of coming around in terms of the having a rich surface. Oh, let's just go on with a little bit of the Memento blue. Danube blue, okay? And add that in. I was going to go with some other color schemes, but I don't think I'm going to do that. I think we get the point here. I was going to do some greens, but the same thing. You just kind of go in with light, medium, dark. And if you have like colors like lime green, even though you don't want it to be lime green, just like I wouldn't want water to be just like, only that color. Although it would look okay, I guess. Grassy areas just come out so much more, I don't know, deep and rich and etc., etc. if you use kind of a range of tones, but especially having a bright undercolor used. Okay, that was a little bit of Prussian blue in here, but take a look at this one right here. See how deep and rich and glowing that is right in here? Okay. Now, if Marvy pads were not available any longer, in addition to things like reinkers, I wouldn't be talking about this so much, but Marvy colors tend to be pretty bright, and they're nice colors to use within kind of this method, because they do apply over the tops of the darker ones. Now, I could have used more Memento in here or something like that. You can do that too. But Marvy does sell reinkers and blank pads. If you want it in pad form, you can also just get a reinker. And because these are sponge tips right here, you can always use like a watercolor palette or something like that and put your inkers in there. You can squeeze a little drop of, salvia, light blue and Prussian blue or whatever. There's probably more ink in reinkers anyways. Pads are real convenient to use, of course, because I just dip in there and I don't have to squeeze out different colors, but hey. Okay, my battery just ran out of juice, so switched there, but what I was talking about was the intensity right here. If you have, and a lot of people do, you already have all these other brands of pads, okay? You have 3 colors of blue, light, medium, dark, whatever. And let's say it was not achieving, some of the intensity that you might want in your end result. You don't necessarily have to go with like 3 different Marvy pads or something like that if you want to get that super rich, more saturated glow, okay? You can just go with, you can use your other pads, Memento or Ranger or whatever. Stampin' Up has some great pads out there. But if there's kind of a blue missing or something like that, you can always just go with like one of the really bright tones, okay, of, like, say, the Marvy line. And you can incorporate it in with your other brands, okay, and it'll increase the overall intensity of all of your other colors from whatever manufacturer that you're using, okay? You can do that like kind of undertone. So on this one right here, I put it over the top of the, other colors in here. On this one right here, I use the number 10 over the top of the Mementos. But I mean, it could have been used somewhere else in the process. It could have been first if you wanted it to. I wouldn't do that. I would go with like a lighter tone, but it could have been at the base coat with all these other colors laid on over the top of it, and it would still look that that intense, because these are transparent colors that you're using. So where they are overlaid within the process doesn't really matter because they're all clear. All right. So that being said, mix and match. Play around with your colors that you have. See what combinations work out well for you. As far as the application goes, use a lot of your first one or two colors within a given color scheme if you're doing it like this process where you would go from light tones to dark tones, okay? So it's going from light to dark, and I'm also working thick to thin if you're using Marvy pads. I like to go with the Mementos, Ranger Industries, inks are really good to use as your base coats, and I like to find, I use more light tones than I do darker tones, even though I get kind of darker in the end in a lot of this, process, but the most amount of coverage is really the lightest ones, because the lightest ones go into the scene the farthest. Alright, so Memento and Marvy. Marvy, kind of a minimal application as far as the darker tones, and I just changed it down here. I added that number 10. And the deepest saturation right here, as far as the amount of ink went in terms of coverage and saturation and buildup, is right here. Okay, this is the one that I usually do. And then this one right here is the same amount of coverage as this one, but just less of almost all inks, okay? It looks pretty good, but this part right here to me is really glowing. This part to me is glowing a little bit. So, different looks for different areas within a scene, different types of scenes and whatnot, and this all works right here on the glossy cardstock. Okay, there's Kromekote out there, there's Ranger, and in doing the recent tests between those two different types of papers, those papers should work just fine for this technique right here. Anyways, hope that helps. Hope that comes in handy. There weren't too many surprises for me, I guess. I guess this one right here, I knew that just in terms of the application. I haven't done just only one brand of inks in quite a while, though, because I use them all. But the Mementos went on just so smoothly, and I don't know. That third color didn't apply, but it did affect the overall, and it has really nice consistency. But if you want to go darker over the top of that, it's best to kind of throw in probably a Marvy brand ink as well. Alright, thanks for watching, and thanks as always for tuning into the channel.